revolutions of 1848, known as the Spring of Nations, were a major moment in European history, leading to changes all around the world. These revolutions were a unified movement led by the working class across Europe, driven by demands for social, economic, and political rights. While the uprisings are often interpreted as failure due to their suppression by their respective governments, they should be credited for the new rights, reforms, and responsibilities they instituted. In the 1840s, poor harvests across Europe led to widespread famine. The working class, whose diet relied on potatoes and grain, was hit especially hard in 1845 to 46 by potato blight and grain crop failures, leading to sharp rises in the prices of those staples. At the same time, industrialization disrupted traditional economies by replacing skilled artisans with industrial machines. This led to the rapid expansion of cities, straining infrastructure and forcing workers to live in overcrowded and unsanitary slums with high rent. Many working-class laborers were forced into factory work with long hours and insufficient pay, causing severe financial strain. As said by Giuseppe Olivi, the cities were full of poor begging for bread and were invaded by great hordes of peasants, human carcasses with sunken eyes who could hardly stagger along with the aid of a stick. This was combined with feudal obligations in rural areas, which was unpaid labor on aristocratic lands, and serfdom, where workers were under a landlord, leading to what Karl Marx called forced labor. As wages decreased and prices rose, social tension intensified with the bourgeoisie or upper class, fearing that uprisings by the lower class could destabilize the capitalist system, losing their hold over economic resources and property. The Communist Manifesto encapsulates this as, society as a whole is more and more splitting up into two great hostile camps, into two great classes directly facing each other, bourgeoisie and proletariat. Ideas of overthrowing absolute monarchy across Europe spread, with writers and speakers promoting reform arrested. Despite this, speeches were performed, and the Communist Manifesto, written by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels, was published. This gave the working class a way to unite across borders, leading to growing discontent. And as Alexis de Tocqueville put it, I believe that we are at this moment sleeping on a volcano. Proletariat united and began the wave of revolutions across Europe. Beginning in Palermo, Sicily, the revolutions were in response to crushing taxes, corruption, and exclusion from political participation. On the morning of January 9th, brothers Rossano and Francesco Bagnasso posted a manifesto in the city, translating to Sicilians, "The time for prayers has passed in vain. The protests, the supplications, the peaceful demonstrations have been in vain. To arms, sons of Sicily." They aimed to create a more liberal constitution and stop the cycle of landowners growing wealthier and the working class staying in poverty. On January 9th, protests rose against Bourbon rule, revolutionaries targeting troops in government offices, chanting the song Lulu Lucy in Nero 1848. By January 27th, the Sicilian protesters established the Constitution of 1848, including principles of democracy and early parliamentary representation. They were able to achieve a loss of censorship but struggled to maintain control. 16 months later, the revolutionaries were taken down due to their failure to control Messina, and there's a restoration of absolute monarchy, unleashing harsh crackdowns and imprisoning many activists. Following the wave of revolutions, the February revolutions in France started. People organized Campagne des Banquets, translating to banquet campaigns, to criticize Louis-Philippe I, as he favored the wealthy bourgeoisie and gave limited political rights to the proletariat. These were used by the working class to especially critique the laws of voting only for property-owning males. However, the banquets were banned, which is the final straw, paired with political discontent, low wages, and high food prices, according to Tocqueville. I found in the capital 100,000 armed workmen forced into regiments, out of work, dying of hunger, but with their minds crammed with vain theories and visionary hopes. I saw society cut into two, those who possessed nothing, united in a common greed, those who possessed something, united in a common terror. On February 22nd, protests in Paris turned into a full-scale revolution with barricades erected against the monarchy and government of François Guizot. Revolutionaries took control of the capital, leading to Philippe abdicating 2 days later. The Second Republic was proclaimed and introduced universal manhood suffrage, granting voting rights to all adult men. Spearheaded by Louis Blanc, the new government instituted national workshops, a program that provided jobs for the unemployed. However, with the shortage of jobs and a surplus of workers, the national workshops were cut in June 1848, leading to unrest. A speech by Pierre-Joseph went, "Revolution of 1848, what do you call yourself? I'm the right to work. And your motto? Equality before fortune." On June 23rd, revolutionaries rose in rebellion, building barricades throughout France. The government gave control of the army to General Louis-Eugène Cavaignac, and 3 days later, the uprising was over. Almost 1,500 workers were killed, with thousands more wounded or captured. This paved the way for Louis Napoleon Bonaparte, who was elected president and declared himself emperor through a coup. France was put under harsh rule, and in Marx's words, "The tricolor republic now displays only one color, the color of the defeated, the color of blood." Hungary was largely agrarian during this time, with many forced to work in farming under a feudal system. Peasants had feudal dues and high taxes, while the upper class enjoyed tax exemptions. Discontent with these conditions, the working class rebelled against their rulers, the Austrians. A group of revolutionaries led by Sándor Petőfi in Pest issued the 12 Points, a list of demands calling for freedom of the press, the abolition of censorship, an independent government, and the establishment of institutions like a national army and guard. An influential Hungarian activist, Lajos Kossuth, said, "There is a truth in the assertion that we were struggling for our ancient rights, for the right of self-government." They also wanted the end of class divisions, as well as no serfdom and feudal dues. Under pressure, Emperor Ferdinand I sanctioned the April Laws, granting Hungary the request and introducing responsibilities of universal taxation. However, the new Austrian monarch, Franz Joseph I, viewed these changes as a threat to his authority and revoked the April Laws, leading to the Hungarian War of Independence. The war saw Hungarian revolutionaries fight against both the Austrians and the Russians, and in 1849, Hungary was defeated and placed under strict military rule by Julius Haynau. While the 1848 revolutions were ultimately suppressed, they were not a failure. They weakened the idea of absolute monarchy and set the stage for the eventual rise of democratic governments across Europe. Furthermore, the revolutions introduced lasting rights and responsibilities and led to many key events in history. In Sicily, the revolutions created governmental reforms, and as Mikhail Bakunin said, "The revolution, in its omnipotence, declared the dissolution of the states of the despots. Thus, dissolution, overturn, and regeneration in the entire Europe, a free Italy, giving way to Italian unification of 1871. Unification led to more political rights, including male suffrage, the loss of suppression and high taxes, and a democratic government. Citizens also gained responsibilities of mandatory military participation and fought resistance and banditry in the south. In France, universal manhood suffrage was established, and the people earned freedom of the press, as well as freedom of religion in the future. They also gained responsibilities of compulsory education, culminating in the Ferry Laws. While originally suppressed, the revolutions led to lasting rights in the Third Republic, eventually transitioning into democracy.
So, Hungarians were so upset that Austria and Russia crushed their revolution that they refused to cooperate with the new Austrian government. They cheated on their taxes. They grew tobacco illegally because the state had a tobacco monopoly. And so Austria realizes we have to make some kind of a deal with the Hungarians, or it'll be hard to govern our empire. So what ends up is in 1867, they have negotiations and they reach a compromise. It's called the Austro-Hungarian Compromise, or in German, the Ausgleich.
The revolutions in Hungary put an end to serfdom and feudal dues, and the Austro-Hungarian Compromise of 1867 gave them the responsibility to have their own parliament and government, sharing a military.
1848, in the short term, is a failure, but in the longer term, establishes that there is this impulse for democratic republics, and in the fullness of time, that eventually these ideas would prevail across Europe, and that the Republican form of government would become the norm as we see in the 20th century, especially today in the post-45 period.
While the revolutions may have failed in their immediate goals, they were successful in the long term, giving citizens new rights, responsibilities, and influencing government systems of democracy around the globe.